Good morning, Professor KAHNEMAN. It's a great pleasure and honor to talk to you today. We're going to talk a little bit about the decision-making process. But first, and to break the ice, I would like to ask you about your research. You know, we've been reading your research for a number of years. Now it's mainstream, I guess, in MBA programs. You've been awarded the Nobel Prize in Economics. Noise, judgment, bias. What's next? What are you working on at the moment?
Well, I'm still working on noise. And I'm also working on some problems of understanding the cognitive reflection test. It's the famous puzzle with the bat and the ball that together cost $1.10 and the bat cost $1 more than the ball. How much did the ball cost? It turns out that very many people make mistakes, very intelligent people make mistakes on that one, and we're studying in some detail what caused those mistakes. This is the project I'm engaged in now.
And can you tell us something about your findings, what is causing those mistakes in smart people?
Yes. It turns out that there is, fairly separate from intelligence, there is something like impulsive thinking, which is the tendency to just believe in things uncritically. It's uncritical thinking. And the people who make mistakes on the cognitive reflection test, that puzzle that I mentioned, the bat and the ball cost $1.10, the bat cost $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? The first association is 10 cents. Now, the people who say 10 cents, which is a mistake, the true answer is 5 cents, but you have to think about it. The people who say 10 cents are also more superstitious. They are also more skeptical about science. They have greater faith in their intuition, and they're also more impatient. That is, they're willing to pay more to get something immediately rather than to delay gratification in the future. So there is a whole complex of things that are associated with that. Obviously, it follows on the work I did earlier in System 1 and System 2. And I'm working with a number of people, and we're getting good results on that.
Okay. Look forward to reading more about that. Let me take you to the corporate world. Those of us who know corporations know that we tend to please bosses. We know how they think and go in that direction, or hire consultancies that will tell us what we want to hear. In that context, how you create processes to reduce noise and bias within large corporations that sometimes are like ministries?
You have to set up a process, and the first thing to do, obviously, is to protect dissent. That is, the people who disagree have to be protected, and the pessimists have to be protected, because quite often you will have the group getting enthusiastic, especially if the leader supports an idea, and the pessimists and those who raise doubts need protection. And that has to be part of the culture. In addition, there are procedures, just how to make decisions, what step to go through, that we propose. We developed that in some detail in our latest book, my latest book, Noise. We developed in much more detail than earlier some steps that organizations could take to improve the quality of their decision making.
Okay, let me take you to a more difficult subject, if you wish, which is the link between politics and individual decision-making. One of the features I think we've seen is a great divide. We have it here in Argentina, in Brazil, in the United States, among other countries where everything is kind of love and hate. Can you link that with decisions about, say, investing or vaccination, which is a big a big issue where I hear that in some states where Trump wins, people don't want to get a vaccine. Is there a link there, or it's just coincidence?
You know, the general question is, where do our beliefs come from? Why do we believe in what we believe? And if you ask people what they believe, for example, on a political question, they will explain themselves. They will tell you reasons for believing what they do. But in fact, the reasons are not the real causes of our beliefs. We believe in things because we trust people who believe that thing. This is how we develop our religious beliefs. This is largely how we develop our political beliefs. And then once we believe in something, we develop reasons, but the reasons come second, they don't come first. And the first thing that comes is, who do you trust? And do you trust the president of Brazil, or do you trust Mr. Trump, or do you trust scientists? And there are cultural and political forces at work, but it has very little to do with reason and with evidence.
And how do you? I mean, let me rephrase. How do you link this trust thing that you were mentioning with the decision making? Because we typically model rationality. I'm a rational person, but then I trust somebody for maybe different reasons.
Well, and that's a very difficult question because there is no simple answer. For example, how much trust should we put in leaders? And it's obvious that you need some trust in leaders because that is what provides coherence in the operation of an organization. This is what mobilizes people. On the other hand, when there is too much trust, or when dissent is made difficult, then you have problems of instability and mistakes. So calibrating the strength of the leadership with the possibility of dissent, calibrating the optimism that is necessary to get things done with the willingness to question decisions, that is certainly part of a good culture of decision making. Some organizations have it, others don't, and those that do not have that kind of culture are more dependent on the quality of their leader than they really should be.
Crystal clear. I'm very interested in that culture of decision making that you were mentioning. What are the features? I mean, if you want to name companies, but even if you don't want to name companies, I mean, what those companies have in terms of good culture of decision making?
Well, they have leaders that are generally trusted, but who are willing to be contradicted and who are willing to admit that they made mistakes. They have procedures of decision making so that there are rules about how decisions are made. And there is a good allocation of responsibilities among people so that people know what their role is in decision making. There has to be a culture where at a certain level, people are allowed to dissent and they're allowed to have different opinions and there is free debate. And beyond a certain point when a decision is made, then it has to be executed. And so you need that combination of discipline and freedom. And some organizations have it and others don't. And of course, in those cases, I don't know that much about organizations, but even if I did, I would not name them.
Is that related also with, the non-punishment of mistakes or tolerance to some mistakes?
That is certainly related, and you have that. You have that in the clearest form, I think, in some venture capital firms or investment firms, where decisions are made, and typically there is one person who is mostly in charge of the decision. But it's extremely important to protect those people from being blamed when the decisions go sour, because it has to be recognized, and in those firms it is recognized, that a decision is a gamble, that there is no guarantee of success, that the best possible decision can lead to a failure and can be very costly. And it becomes extremely important to protect people. And that means that although you have somebody who is in charge, the final responsibility for making decisions has to go either with the group or with the leader of the group, and not with the person who pushed a certain idea. Otherwise, you are going to get people to be too conservative, too risk averse, and so calibrating the right amount of calibrating the organization to take the correct amount of risk really requires that kind of protection of people from their mistakes.
Terrific. Thank you very much. You've written about the role of algorithms or intelligence, artificial intelligence, to reduce noise and all that. How do you square that with the concept of, emotional intelligence? Because, I mean, from the outside, from somebody like me, ignorant, can say, okay, it's all about algorithms now, and those kind of guys that were, emotional intelligent are no longer needed. I'm sure I'm exaggerating things, but I would like your take on that.
Well, in the first place, what is happening with artificial intelligence, the most striking thing that is happening is the speed at which it is developing. So what we see today and what is going to be happening in 5 years are really completely different. In the world of today, most decisions are made by people, whether with emotional intelligence or just in whatever way they make them. This is going to remain true for a while. But the number of decisions that are actually made better by artificial intelligence than by people is increasing every year. That is, every year more and more judgments and decisions that people used to make, that professionals used to make, are now being made better by machines, by artificial intelligence. This is true for landing planes. It is true for going into space. It is true for detecting problems in the retina. It is true for the detection of breast cancer. And I'm not talking about chess or Go, where clearly humans are superfluous. But the number of real decisions where artificial intelligence is better than people is increasing every year. And the interesting question, and it's not, there is no answer, but it's going to be very interesting, is when the decisions that are now the province of leaders, strategic decisions, when artificial intelligence becomes good enough to, and basically it's an issue of the size of databases and the quality of the analysis of those databases, when there are enough data so that artificial intelligence is as good, is almost as good as people, then within a very short time, artificial intelligence will be better than people. And that, how leaders are going to cope with artificial intelligence that has better business judgments than they do. That's going to be a very interesting question, and I think it's going to happen within the next few decades.
So things like charisma will be less important than today?
Well, I don't know how leaders are going to take it. I don't, at the moment, part of leadership is really a trust in their intuition and their ability to see the future. We exaggerate our trust in leaders and in their judgment. But when you have that competition, when artificial intelligence can pass judgments on the quality of business decisions, how leaders are going to deal with that, how organizations are going to deal with that, I have no idea, but it's not going to be easy. That is clear. And you mentioned emotional intelligence earlier. It's very clear that emotional intelligence is one of the domains where artificial intelligence is going to be overtaking humans very rapidly. And this is because if imagine that you have a robot in a home that is following the facial expressions of the various members of the family and the tone of their voices and maybe understanding what they say in part, that robot will be able to predict what comes next in the emotional situation of a family or a group much better than people will. And the reason is that all emotional intelligence will go back to a common pool of knowledge. All robots, anything that one robot learns, all robots will learn. And so the rate at which artificial intelligence will learn about emotions is clearly far superior than what people can achieve.
Do you see politics, lagging companies in this process of adapting to artificial intelligence or algorithms?
I agree with you, with what is implicit in your question. I think that organizations that are driven by profit and by shareholders and by boards of directors, they're going to try to optimize much harder than governments will. So I think it is to be expected that the introduction of artificial intelligence into judgment and decision-making in commercial organization and businesses is going to arrive faster than in government, where politics are going to play an important role for much longer.
Which probably means that there is an asymmetry of forces. Somebody is smarter than the counterpart, isn't it?
I think this is going to happen. I think that, it's the very striking thing is that the speed at which it's happening, and it's exponential. And I think so the speed of developments is increasing, and it's extremely difficult for us to foresee how an exponential process is going to develop. And so it's hard for us to see, but all we can say with some confidence is that a great many changes are going to happen within the next 10 or 15 years, let alone within the next 30 or 40, because of artificial intelligence. That, I think, is almost certain, or very likely. I shouldn't say almost certain, nothing is certain.
Great. I mean, let me take you back to noise. I mean, we've read about how companies or organizations in general can mitigate or reduce noise, but I would like to hear your take on what happens with non-recurrent decisions.
Well, suppose, and this is what we propose in the book, suppose you have a system that improves the quality of recurrent decisions. For example, the decision that venture capitalists make. They make repeatedly decisions about investments. Underwriters make repeated decisions about complex risks. Now, my colleague Olivier Sibony had a beautiful phrase, I think. He said, a unique event is a recurrent event that happens only once. That is, the logic of recurrent events and the procedures that improve the quality of recurrent decisions, there is no reason to believe that they don't apply to singular decisions. And so clearly what we can study most effectively is recurrent decisions, and we can look at the procedures that work there. But any procedures that works well for recurrent decisions is likely, when properly adapted, to help with singular decisions as well.
Thank you. Maybe two more questions. The first one is you mentioned a lot the word hygiene for cleaning the process. Can you elaborate a little bit more and give us examples on hygiene?
We introduced the term decision hygiene, and in part because it's a slightly shocking term. But what is the idea? The idea is a distinction between bias and noise. So when you have particular errors that you want to control, this is like a disease, and you're talking about medications or about vaccines which are specific to a particular disease. Now, washing your hands, which is hygiene, is completely different in character. You don't know what errors you're fighting. And you will never know, if you're successful, what germs you're killing. So decision hygiene is just how to generally improve the quality of decisions. And there are some rules about this. One principle, very important rule, is to try to make judgment statistically independent of each other, statistically and realistically independent of each other. That means breaking up judgment problems and dealing with each sub-problem independently before they're recombined. It means getting individuals, when a group has to make decisions, getting individuals to try to reach their individual decisions first and then start discussing them, instead of developing an opinion in the course of a group discussion, which tends to be noisier. So there are procedures that, if followed, we are pretty sure reduce noise, reduce bias, and improve decisions. And those we call decision hygiene.
Okay, thank you. So the very last question, and maybe a selfish one, I come from the dismal science, and you were awarded the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2002, and kind of brought fresh air to economics. Do you see the economy interacting more with other disciplines, or what do you see coming in those fields?
Well, I'm not an economist, so I really don't know what is happening, but it's very clear that economics is getting closer. Several disciplines, psychology, it's obvious, in behavior economics, but there is now a lot of interaction, I think, between economists and sociological problems. That is, the techniques of economists, the econometric techniques, the measurement techniques, are probably superior to those of other social sciences, and there is integration happening at that level. At the more distant level, there are even studies, there's even a field that is called neuroeconomics, which is the connection, the link between neuroscience and economic decision-making. This is a very young discipline, but there are very good people working on it.
Excellent. Professor KAHNEMAN, thank you very, very much. It's been super interesting for us. So again, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.